Frank James King was born July 28, 1925 in San Francisco, California. When Frank was still a boy, the family moved south to Long Beach. It was there that he met his sweetheart, Catherine Gloria Ruddy. He was 15 years old and she was only 14. They'd spend the weekends together dancing jitterbug and swing. On December 7, 1941, the Japanese would attack the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor, killing over 2,000 Americans. America had just entered World War II. Frank would do his part. After graduating high school in 1943, he enlisted in the Navy.
All the nice girls, they like the tar. Or there's something about a sailor. Well, you know how the sailors are. Nice and breezy, free and easy.
Frank attended boot camp in San Diego, California, along with thousands of other men who had answered the nation's call of duty. After boot camp, Frank was assigned to Amphibious Operations Training Division, where he would learn to operate the Higgins boat, or a landing craft as they would later be called. Frank's next assignment was aboard the troop ship USS John Land. In April of 1944, the John Land left San Francisco, bound for the South Pacific. The John Land's first stop was Hawaii.
Gonna take a sentimental...
During Liberty, Frank passed the time by exploring the island and enjoying the tropical weather. It was an exciting time, being 18 years old with friends in Hawaii and heading to war.
Make a sentimental journey to renew old memories. I've got my bag, got my reservation, spent each dime I could afford. I'm like a child.
As the crew neared the end of their time in Hawaii, the reality of war began to return to their minds. Some sailors would not be coming home. After almost a month in Hawaii, the John Land set sail for a group of islands called the Marianas. On the morning of June 15, 1944, the John Land arrived off Saipan, a 12-mile-long island boasting over 30,000 Japanese soldiers. Frank recalls that morning eating corned beef hash and eggs with no grease so the troops wouldn't get sick on the boats. At 7 a.m., Marines from the 2nd and 4th Division climbed down the cargo nets into Frank's landing craft. As practiced, the landing craft circled in the rendezvous point, waiting for the signal from the command to head into the beach. Battleships and destroyers shelled the island as the landing craft headed toward the beach. Soon, Frank began to see light mortar and machine gun fire from Japanese positions ashore. As the boats moved closer to the beach, Frank remembers seeing a tall smokestack from a sugar mill. The stack was the only thing left standing. Finally, landing craft number 12, Frank's boat, made it to shore. Over the next 3 days, the crew carried troops, equipment, and casualties to and from the island. On June 26th, the John Land left Saipan. Frank had survived. To the south of Saipan lay the small island of Tinian. With 10,000 Japanese soldiers, Tinian was the next Allied objective. The invasion began the morning of July 24, 1944. Marines from the 2nd Marine Division climbed down the cargo nets into the landing craft. Frank recalls that instead of taking the Marines ashore, however, they climbed back onto the ship out of sight of the enemy. Frank's boat and the other landing craft of the John Land would be a part of a feint landing off the southwestern shore of the island used to draw the Japanese forces south. As the landing craft drove towards the beach, mortars rained down all around them. Frank said, "The Japanese threw everything at us but the kitchen sink." Before reaching the shore, the landing craft turned around and returned to the John Land. With the feint a success, the John Land joined the main invasion force to the north. Frank's boat once again sped towards shore, but carried in it Marines this time. After offloading the Marines, Frank can remember watching two Marines, one with a flamethrower, hurl grenades into a patch of tules to flush out a Japanese soldier. Suddenly, the Japanese soldier emerged, threw a grenade, which exploded, killing both of the Marines, and ran into the jungle. It happened so fast, we could only watch in horror. Over the next 2 days, they evacuated the wounded. Frank was 4 days short of his 19th birthday. Of all the invasions Frank made, he'll tell you that Peleliu was the worst. The 5-mile-long island was nothing but jagged coral protecting 11,000 Japanese soldiers. D-Day was September 15, 1944. Frank's boat was loaded with Marines from the 1st Marine Division. He remembers the sky very clear and blue, and the day hot, approximately 120 degrees. This caused Marines to pass out from heat exhaustion before reaching the shore. Being low tide, the landing craft could not cross the coral reef, forcing them to transfer the Marines into amphibious tanks. By noon, however, the tide had risen, allowing Frank's boat to proceed to the beach. Once ashore, Frank and his crew, Walter Stotcliffe, Bertie McHenry, and Thetford, walked up towards the airstrip. Frank can recall being on the airstrip chatting with a few Marines when suddenly a Japanese tank barreled around a corner and headed straight towards them. A bazooka team was called up and hurriedly put the tank and crew out of commission. What Frank remembers most about Peleliu were the rows of dead Marines on the airstrip. They were 18 and 19-year-old kids they had brought into the beach that morning. Eventually, mortar fire from Bloody Nose Ridge caused the crew to head back to the ship. Back aboard the John Land, Frank aided in taking care of the wounded. All the Marines loved him for his Al Jolson impressions and his skill as the head wipe. One Marine, named Jojo, asked for peanuts. "They won't fit in your tube," Frank told him. Jojo died the next day. In October of 1944, the John Land arrived off the island of Leyte in the Philippines. On board the ship was the President of the Philippines, Sergio Osmeña, and his staff. On the 20th of October, landing craft from the John Land carry him and General MacArthur ashore for their famous return to the Philippines. Frank's boat was only a few hundred feet away. A few days later, Frank witnessed a kamikaze plane fly over the John Land and into another ship. You could only imagine the casualties. On January 9, 1945, Frank and his crew transported soldiers of the 43rd Infantry Division ashore on Luzon for the final battle of the Philippines. And in March of 1945, the John Land arrived off the small volcanic island of Iwo Jima. Frank's boat made several trips ashore to unload supplies, equipment, and evacuate the wounded. Loaded with elements of the 5th Marine Division, the John Land then set sail for Hawaii. Arriving in Pearl Harbor in April of 1945, it had been almost a year since the crew of the John Land had first left Hawaii. From Hawaii, they returned to America, then to their families. The war was now over for them.
Just kiss me once, then kiss me twice.
Frank would go on to marry Gloria later that year.
It's been a long, long time. Haven't felt like this, my dear, since can't remember when. It's been a long, long time. You'll never know how many dreams.
In August of 1945, the war ended.
Or just how empty they are.
However, Frank would go on to serve 20 more years in the Navy.
So kiss me once, then kiss me twice, then kiss
And of course,
me once again.
start a family.
It's been a long